Welcome back. I have even more to share with you about plate tectonics. I would like to talk to you about the plates. We talked about how the Earth's surface is broken up into the plates of the crust, that it's not just one big piece like the shell of an egg, but it's broken, like a broken shell of a hard-boiled egg. And so those pieces of the crust don't just sit there in one place, they move around, they float around on the mantle. We talked about that when we talked about the plastic mantle. The mantle is very hot and it moves depending on how the heat is changing the mantle. And so I have more to share with you about plate tectonics. This is really interesting. This is part of the reason why I studied geology, and that was why that was my first career. So I want to show you some things. Sometimes we can pretend these are the plates of the Earth. We can pretend that this one here is North America and this one here is the Pacific Ocean. I should maybe color them so that they look that way. So down in California, something interesting is happening. Imagine that this one here is the land of California, and this is down here, this is like Baja California, part of Mexico, up through San Francisco. Something amazing is happening there. The plates of North America and the Pacific plate are not just hanging out next to each other, they're sliding. The side that has Baja California and San Francisco and Southern California on it is moving to the north, and the plate that North America is on is not moving as fast as the Pacific plate. And so when they're moving alongside of each other, the motion is like this, like sliding along them. These two plates are sliding along this boundary right here. They start right here, but then they're sliding alongside each other just like that. This is called a transform fault or transform plate boundary. Transform plate boundaries happen when the plates are sliding alongside of each other and the motion is one is going one direction and the other is going the other direction. Like that. Okay. Now I want to talk about another type of plate boundary. This is a plate boundary that is happening in places like the Himalayan mountains. We have India. I'll put it this direction because that's the way it is on the map. India is moving to the north, and Asia, the Asian continent, is sitting still up here. When India is moving to the north, it's running into Asia, and what's happening is those two plates are both continental plates, and it's pushing until we get this very high mountain range. This very high mountain range has Mount Everest, the highest mountain in the world. When two continental plates are pushing against each other, they're both lightweight. They're both very light compared to each other. And so this bottom plate has to push this one, squish it together, because neither one of them can sink because they're both lightweight. I want to talk about one more way like this. Something is happening along our coast. There's still the same type of motion. There's still this kind of motion. We have the North American plate, and then we have this plate is called the Wanda Fuca plate. Maybe you've heard of the Strait of Wanda Fuca off of the coast of Washington. Well, here, this is a continental plate, and this is an oceanic plate, and as they push into each other, they're pushing this direction. As they're pushing, mountains are forming, but this other plate, the Wanda Fuca plate, pushes underneath. And what happens in this kind of a plate boundary, see how it's underneath of there? This plate underneath starts to melt. And as it melts, it makes a special kind of magma that seeps up through, and we end up with a chain of volcanoes. The Cascade Volcanoes are this kind of environment where we have this melting plate underneath, pushing up and forming mountains along here. These two plate motions where they're pushing together and either staying next to each other or pushing and going under are called convergent plate boundaries. And maybe you remember from convergent lines that convergent means they're coming together. coming together. Convergent plate boundaries have the motion of coming together. Okay, that was our second kind of plate boundary, and we have one more plate boundary to talk about. We are going to talk about what happens when two plates spread apart. I needed one more label. There we go. Okay, so imagine these are both, it doesn't really matter. They could be both continental plates or oceanic plates. In this case, the plates are going to spread apart. They're going to pull apart. And when this happens, in between the two plates, we get an upwelling of magma. And as they pull apart a little more, we get more magma, and we get what's called a ridge. This kind of ridge forms at a plate boundary where the plates are moving apart. We talked about convergent is when the plates are moving towards each other, and we talked about how when we have that with lines, we call it convergent. Well, think about lines, and when they're moving apart, they're called divergent. Divergent, the lines are moving away from each other. In a divergent plate boundary, the plates are moving apart, and we get new land, new crust is formed right here. In transform plate boundaries, they're sliding alongside of each other. Nothing's happening. We're not getting any mountain building. We're not getting any new land. In convergent plate boundaries, the plates are coming together and they're building mountains. They're building mountains. In divergent plate boundaries, the plates are ripping apart and forming new crust. New crust is being formed with divergent plate boundaries. There is so much more to learn about the different plate boundaries, and I'm going to attach another video for you to watch. Your follow-up is to take notes on convergent, divergent, and transform plate boundaries in your journal and watch the video down below. I'll see you next time. Thanks, everyone.